This episode of Made in America is brought to you by America's Inventorly and Home Talk USA. Home Talk is a proud member of the King's Broadcasting Network, which has been bringing you the best in home-based innovation since 1998.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us for this episode of Made in America.
That's right. This is the Made in America show right here on the King's Broadcasting Network. And welcome to the Chairman's Countdown with Zach Modi, along with some co-host guests. We have Mr. John Tooney with Prosperous America and your favorite host in America, the Cajun man from the Bayou Land, the originator, not the duplicator. Please don't accept no substitution. Who am I? The Cajun contractor. Hey, Zach. Hey, John. What's going on, buddy?
Cajun man, good to be with you today. You know, one of the things I want to talk about today, medicine. It's a matter of national security, isn't it? And if it is, how come we're still importing all the ingredients? We're going to tell you about what is a Pharma 232, and we might get change the math on what we're doing with pharmaceuticals. You know, we're also going to get a special guest, David Sanders. He's the head of government relations for Coherus Biosciences. We're going to talk about China versus U.S. biotech competition and what they're doing in terms of government relations for that, and what it means, this pharmaceutical 232. Why is it important to make our medicine here in America, and where are they making it now? A lot of it's in India. So we'll get into all that within the next hour here. And I've got my friend John Toomey on. John, what is a Pharma 232? What's going on in pharmaceuticals?
Zach, good to be with you this week. This is the president's agenda of reshoring our basic medicine. He's doing it via the 232 powers over at the Department of Commerce. It stems on national security concerns. The president has been very clear since day one that we're going to make our basic medicine here in the U.S. We're going to make sure we have medicine for our hospitals, for our seniors, for our pharmacies. No more are we going to be dependent on India and China for our most basic medicines. And so we're going to get into the 232, and Dave Sanders, our special guest, is going to tell us all about it. So it's a very exciting day and very exciting agenda here coming up for the president over the next couple of weeks.
Well, John, one thing I want to know is, this has been going on for a long time, hasn't it? Why now? What's the urgency now? Why is the president taking action?
So look back over 40 years, Zach. 40 years ago, the Congress passed something called Hatch-Waxman, okay? This was a bipartisan bill. It gave the framework for generic drugs to flourish in this country. And just for everyone listening, generics are 90% of all prescriptions that are prescribed here in this country. They're the majority of hospital products. They're the products that you're getting in your Medicare package. But Congress 40 years ago recognized that, hey, there should be a cheaper alternative to the innovative products, the branded products, the products that you know about that, Merck makes and Pfizer and the others. And so generics were born 40 years ago. However, the last 20 years, Zach, we've been offshoring these products to Asia, namely China and India. The governments of India and China have stood up programs to dominate the generic drug industry, recognizing it's the importance, and they have been hollowing out our productive capacity of these most basic medicines. And today, the U.S. is very dependent on India and China for these medicines. We know from some that these products are not even working. There was a blockbuster study that came out in February. The study said, from the Ohio State University, any Buckeyes listening, the study said, if you take a generic drug from India, get this, Zach, if you take a generic drug from India, you have a 54% greater likelihood of contracting a serious adverse event as compared to taking an American or European equivalent.
What? This is crazy. And how do
It's
I
me-
know where my drug even came from as a consumer? Don't I get to pick? I want those American drugs. I don't want the one that's going to make me sick from India or China.
The game has been set that you have very little to zero visibility into where these products are coming from. When you visit your pharmacy, when you go to your hospital, when you talk to your doctor, ask them these questions because they themselves do not even know. There's very little resources for the American consumer right now. That is why President Trump is making it his agenda, one of his top priorities. He campaigned on this, and that is to ensure that these products are made here. You know, Zach, back in the day, 20 plus years ago, there was a pharma belt in this country. It was an area outside Philadelphia, Route 202, up into New Jersey, for any listeners in the region there. And that is where a lot of these products were made. They were made out in Chicago and Northern California. But sadly today, thanks to predatory pricing, thanks to government schemes that have been set up by the government of India and the government of China, we no longer have our productive capacity of these basic medicines in this country.
Wow.
Two things that are so important that I want to make here. Number one is obviously, and I'm going to go, let's decrease the price. How do you do that? And I think these policies, we have to pay less for our medicine because it's not fair for us in the United States to pay, $50 for a pill when, in India or our foreign adversaries are paying $2 for that pill. That's number one. But two, I mean, Zach, you're an American manufacturer. Your EPA, your environmental requirements in producing in your the cleanliness and the safetyness of your manufacturing plant, that's the problem there. Our government standards are so high for you as a manufacturer, but yet you don't know the cleanliness or the environmental issues in India, or we know China doesn't have any. So polluted water, feces in the street, I can go on and on and on.
Michael, you're right on. Sometimes it's feces in your medicine or urine in
that's
their
right.
medicine.
So
there's examples. The FDA goes in these places and they find urine on the floor of the clean room. People wouldn't believe this. This is where your drugs are coming from. And so you raise a really important point. American manufacturers, when you make it here, not only do you have good jobs, I want to employ good people, and so do these drug
clean
makers.
Water,
Clean
energy.
We do it in a clean way. We can make the drugs and we're not dumping the toxins down the street. But on the other hand, the safety, when it's made here, we have members who make drugs in America, and the FDA can show up and knock on their door unannounced anytime for an inspection. On all these drug makers in India and China, you know how it works? They schedule ahead, months ahead. So it's not even a level playing field. Not only do we have the higher cost to be in compliance, which thank God we are, and thank God we make it safe here, but over there, they don't even have the oversight. So people think it's FDA approved. They approved it once and they haven't checked again. And when they do, they find atrocious things like we talked about.
Well, what about, we mentioned the obvious, but there's one thing we haven't even mentioned. That's the insurance requirements that we have to pay for, for errors and omissions and all these things that have to factor in the cost. We can compete if all the rules are the same. And it's not only the federal government needs to, what you just said, and I'm sorry, I'm answering my own question, is basically we're solving the problem by bringing it back to the United States. That's it right there.
Because there's no rule of law. The liability over there, you try to sue some company in India because you had an adverse drug reaction. Good luck even proving it. But you know what, John, I want to bring John back because you made a good point, Michael. Are we paying less for these drugs, John? So we've offshored it. The producers went to chase pennies over in India, and they fired all of our American patriots that were making these pills. Who's benefiting? Is my healthcare going down? Are you paying less, John?
No, it's like the old saying, when the autos left our shores, did anyone pay less for a car? No, that never happened, right?
No.
You don't get the benefit of that. The consumer doesn't get the benefit of that. What the consumer is getting, what the patient's getting now is they're getting subpar quality products coming out of Asia. They are pleading with doctors to make sure they have medicine available for their children. I mean, Zach, there are terrible stories. And we've talked to physicians all across this country, from children's hospitals to leading institutions like the Cleveland Clinic, where parents are pleading with doctors, hey, why can't we get this basic chemotherapy product for my child that's existed for, the last 40 plus years? Well, they can't get it because we offshored this production because we allowed Asia to dominate an industry that we should have never given up. And just think about the vulnerability this creates to our men and women in uniform. I mean, today, the fifth most used therapeutic in the globe is something called heparin. It's a blood thinner, an anticoagulant. We are wholly reliant on China for this medicine. That is insane. And so our vulnerabilities are real, but President Trump is making a real effort here with the 232 powers at the Department of Commerce to lead an investigation. And I'm fairly confident that their investigation will find that, yes, there's a national security vulnerability and we're going to fix it.
Well, and also I know this show is about the 232 pharmaceutical, which is great, but we're going to need to tie something into this. I don't know if you, and I know we're going to take a short break. Is John F. Kennedy Jr. Going in front of Congress talking about the additives in the fuse, which is a whole different issue, but it's all related. But hey, we're going to have to take a short break right here on the Chairman's Countdown with Zach Modi here on the Made in America. We're going to be right back. That's right. This is the Made in America show, the Chairman's Countdown with Zach Modi. We also have John Tooney with the Prosperous America. Zach, I tell you, there's a lot of fireworks going on right now, and the president's trying to bring our pharmaceutical drugs back to the U.S. But hey, you have your boy, Mr. David Sanders, and I tell you, he just a wealth of information, huh, Zach?
That's right, Michael. Thanks for the kind intro. Joining us, we're going to carry on our discussion about making drugs in America and the policy that's behind it, the government policy, how we can do that. We want to make America healthy, we want to make America safe, and we want to make the good jobs in America. So we do have our friend David Sanders. David is the head of government relations at Coherus Biosciences, and we've got him on to walk through the on-the-ground realities of U.S. biotech. Hey, David, thanks for being here today. Tell us a little bit about Coherus's U.S. footprint, the R&D, the manufacturing process, and what you're doing and the rationale about making drugs in America.
Absolutely. Great to be here. Coherus was created about 11 years ago, actually more like 13 years ago, to create American biotech drugs and to bring value to the healthcare system by launching these drugs at a lower price. We got our first drug approved in 2019. We created about 350 internal jobs. We created about 350 external jobs. So for a small biotech, it was a great accomplishment to get to 700 employees, high-paid employees in California and Colorado and Maryland. And we launched our first drug in 2019, the cancer support drug known as UDENYCA, and we were able to achieve significant market share, bringing the entire market down by 30%. So that means we were saving taxpayers and patients money every time they took our cancer support drug the day after chemotherapy. That was our most successful drug to date. We've actually launched multiple government contracts to support our veterans and to support the DoD with that drug. So it is the preferred low-cost drug in the world in that space. It's called a pegfilgrastim. Again, the name is UDENYCA. So we did it because we believed in doing it. Our leader, Denny Lanfear, was born and raised in Michigan, spent his career in biotech out in California. And he said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this here in America. We're going to spend the extra money to make do the research here and to create high-paying American jobs that support the ecosystem, both from government payers and from private payers. And so we think that was the right thing to do. We've done it with all of the other drugs that we developed, 3 of them. And then the 4th drug is a cancer drug that we actually went and we got from a company in China, and we brought it here. The key part of our negotiation was that we need to pull this drug out of China and never manufacture it there again. And that's what we've done over the last 3 years. We got the drug approved. It is for a very rare cancer that patients die from. We give them life with this drug, and we're doing the manufacturing in California and other places here in America, supporting an additional 400 jobs. So we believe we're the model for how the government can incentivize with private capital American manufacturing strength again. And frankly, we've done this in the face of tremendous pressure to do quite the opposite, as John Toomey was talking about. Too many companies looked abroad to do their manufacturing, to try to save money and to try to take advantage of subsidization programs from foreign governments. And that was the wrong thing to do. And I think now we have a government saying those words, who agrees that we need to support more westernized and allied manufacturing, including, of course, here in America.
Dave, your company, you're my hero. That's exactly the kind of company that we need more of, with leaders who see the risks of doing business in China and making the medicine there, reputational risk and beyond. So thank you for doing this and bringing these things back. What is it like, though? You mentioned you had to get it out of China. Is it because you were concerned about IP theft or quality issues? What was the big push to get it out, or just you knew we needed it in America for national security reasons?
Yeah, we need it in America for national security reasons. We need it, make it in America because we're supported by American taxpayers. I mean, half or more than half of our payer base is, of course, Medicare, and patients that are over 65 in Medicare, Medicaid, and the VA. And so, we don't think it's fair to allow a foreign government to essentially fund your manufacturing abroad. We also see a conflict coming with Taiwan that's going to be very severe in terms of the impact on our medical supply chain. And so our key negotiation point, like I said 3 years ago, is we're going to take this drug from you and we're going to move it to America and make it in America for Americans. And so that is what we've done. The other two drugs we're developing, we have foreign rights to them, but we're going to manufacture them here in America.
Well, let's talk.
We may launch through partners.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the next stuff and the next drugs that are coming. So I'm glad to hear you're also lowering prices while you're making good jobs for Americans and giving us safe, clean medicine. But what does it look like to compete with China, to compete with India? What's that kind of playing field look like for a company like yours?
Well, while it can be very difficult to compete with them, we need to start with the bare facts that our government, the U.S. government, heretofore does not buy American. It does not have a buy American preference. So if you think about that, you're talking about the DoD, the VA, and the Medicare. You've got a significant amount of any drug's portion is competing against Chinese products here. So we need to stop that, and that's what's going to happen, I think, related to the 232s. We're going to have a first time ever preference of U.S.-made high-quality drugs, number one. Number two, it's challenging to compete abroad because their labor costs are lower. They're subsidized by their own governments, whether that's China or India, principally. I think we need a better sort of golden pathway between Europe, Japan, Korea, and America. We need to de-risk against Chinese and Indian manufacturing by opening up trade and partnership in Europe and in these other allied countries. So I think that's what needs to happen, because what's happening now is it's easier to outsource the production and the development of a drug to a foreign country. And in fact, over the last 90 days, it's become pretty obvious that China itself is funding innovation. So we were always the head of innovation in biotechnology, America. Now we see that China.
I hate to jump in. We're going to have to take a short break. You're listening to the Chairman's Show. That's right here on the Made in America Network. This is the Cajun Contractor Michael King. We'll be right back. Yahee!
Welcome back. You're on Home Talk Radio with the Chairman's Countdown. I'm Zach Model, Chairman of the Coalition for Prosperous America. We've been chatting with my friend John Toomey, who's the president at CPA, and David Sanders. He's the head of R&D at Coherus Bioscience. And David was just telling us all about what it's like to compete in a global environment, to make drugs in America, to compete against all the subsidized drugs in India and China. He was telling us about all the quality issues and all the other things that we see with these imported drugs. Well, David, why don't you carry on and tell us, what do you think is one of the first policy solutions that we need to see? I know President Trump was talking about doing some innovative things on drugs. You were mentioning these 232s. What's that all about for you?
Yeah, so the government has done some good things over the last 20 years. One good thing they 20 years ago was they advocated for the advent of foreign inspections, but right now there's not enough inspections, especially post-COVID. In other words, there's not enough FDA inspections in places like China and India. In fact, my experience is that the FDA has one inspector in all of China.
Oh my gosh.
So that problem has to be addressed over the next year. We need more inspections abroad, number one. Number two, the 232 investigations, as John stated earlier, are likely to conclude here in the next couple weeks. And we think they're going to show a major over-reliance on specifically India and China manufacturing practices. Number three, I believe there's going to be a carrot and stick approach, and there can be. Most of what I'm talking about does not need to be cleared through Congress. It can be implemented through an administration with existing powers. We can activate what's called the Defense Production Act and use financial tools at the Department of Treasury and the Department of Commerce, among other agencies, to incentivize domestic manufacturing. We can issue grants and loans into manufacturers like Coherus that are willing to make their manufacturing here. Secondarily, we need tariffs against the over-relied products made in China. And I think you're going to see a worldwide tariff of 15%, which is not going to dramatically disrupt pricing here in America. It's more of a cost of doing business, but it will lead to significant tariff revenue. If they do that in relation to the 232, I think that you'll see a separate tariff approach to China and India products, and as you should, frankly, because we need international companies to make investments in America, and you're seeing this in a very significant way from big pharma. They're making big announcements about more American manufacturing. That was not a thing 3 years ago. That was not a reality 4 years, 5, 6 years ago. But because of the first Trump administration and now this Trump administration, you're seeing big investments from private capital and from publicly traded and private companies announcing investments in America. Just the other day, AstraZeneca announced a huge $2 billion investment as a part of an overall plan to invest $50 billion in America. This is a London-based company making outsized investments in American manufacturing. We want to see that replicated with small biotech and smaller pharmaceutical companies and generics. And that's where I think this is going, is a rebirth of the golden age of American manufacturing like it was in the 1990s before Puerto Rico shut down. I mean, we've seen tax structures work in Puerto Rico and Ireland. We need to replicate it.
That's right. The game is on the field. Are we going to play it or not? Are we going to get involved? Or are we going to sit here on the sidelines? So I'm so glad to hear, the testimony that you're giving and how Coherus is hiring, expanding domestically. You're a great example of, hey, when we do policy right, this is what happens. And again, some of these larger drug companies you've mentioned, fantastic stuff here. Of all the things, the Section 232, the tariffs, the other stuff you mentioned, is there one thing that should be done first? What moves the needle the fastest? What's got people running back here right now?
I think the threat of large tariffs is what's going to open them up to making a domestic investment. I think the secondary thing is the overall environment with government policy. I believe in government stepping into a highly regulated industry and incentivizing the private sector to respond. I believe most solutions do come from the private sector, but this is an area where if the government tips its hat, that they're creating an environment for fostering domestic manufacturing and for rewarding allied manufacturing, like from Europe and Japan, then there will be a created by private capital to make outside.
I want to see the government put the thumb on the scale for America a little bit here. Because I think what we're talking about is pennies a pill or less than a penny a pill in many cases. These are very small differences in price. It's just great volume. Am I right on that? And so if we can make that we can close that window, all of a sudden Buy America choice becomes a lot easier for these places. I mean, generally people are patriotic, aren't they? I don't.
Well, generally they should be, and frankly, not enough of our middlemen in the American healthcare system have recognized or rewarded American made. So part of the problem is these pharmacy benefit managers. But one way to create an economy of scale here is to prefer American made, and then to do it as much as you can direct to consumer, or without the expensive middlemen taking too much of the cut of the pie. And the president understands this. He stated it in his executive order, and I think other people at the White House are trying to create an environment where the middlemen can be cut out of the arrangement, and that's how you can get back to the comparable pricing.
Yep,
I mean, just
get the
think for a few
quality,
minutes.
get the pricing down to where it used to be. That's fantastic. You know what? I know John's done a lot of research on this too. I know Mr. Toomey. And you know, what are the ramifications if we do get these tariffs going, and then the pharma, the 232, the Section 232 protections, the tariffs on them? You know, what does it mean for manufacturers, for payers, providers, for patients? You know, how does this kind of change the landscape for everybody here?
Well, I mean, it's massive, right? I mean, these decisions at Commerce are going to impact everything, to how, you know, hospitals will be sourcing products, to how the VA, the DoD are going to be looking at their supply chain. We are hearing from European drug producers today that are reaching out to the Coalition for a Prosperous America about interest in the U.S., about bringing manufacturing to the U.S. And so, you know, it is having the real effects on the marketplace. And, you know, I couldn't be more excited about the horizon for where generics currently stand to go. It's been a long time coming. And, yeah, I think it's really, I'm very bullish on the future for generic drug production in this country.
Love it, John. I know we said at the beginning of the show, but for people just joining, you know, these generics, these are the drugs that are in your medicine cabinet. These are the drugs you take every day, whether you get them on a prescription or even off prescriptions, generic drugs, right? Very few drugs are branded, fancy ones that you see a commercial for. These are the, you know, every hospital, every ambulance has 300 generic drugs in it. They can't do a single thing without those generics. And these are the ones that are not made in America anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They're 90% of all prescriptions. So put it another way, if you have a child or you go to a pharmacy to fill a prescription for, say, an antibiotic, say you have an infection of some type, you are going to receive a generic version of that antibiotic, whether it's penicillin, amoxicillin, cephalosporin. You're not going to receive the branded product, right? The branded product is, you know, off patent. You know, you're going to get a generic drug. And so today, we have one American antibiotic manufacturer left in this country. It's called U.S. Antibiotics in East Tennessee. That's where it sits. That's a terrible position to be in for a country of our size. And so, you know, the goal of this 232 is to ensure that there are additional fermentation sites in this country to make amoxicillin, to make antibiotics. And, you know, you're going to see production spurred as a result of this investigation. You're going to see new investment pour into this industry. So it's very exciting.
This is what we need here in America for our safety, for our security, for our health. I mean, I think people would be, if you actually look at the FDA website, you see the warning letters and the things that are going on, you know, you would be just shocked. But anyway, we're running out of time here. We're getting ready for our next break here. So stick with us. We'll see you back after the commercial break on Home Talk Radio with the Chairman's Made in America Countdown Hour. I'm Zach Model, the Chairman. There, we're back with the Home Talk Radio Made in America Chairman's Countdown Hour. I'm Zach Model, the chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, here with my friend John Toomey, the president from the coalition. And you know, before the break, we were just talking about pharmaceutical drugs and making drugs in America, the importance of why we need the safe drugs, why it makes good jobs in America. But you know, a part of this piece of this picture of where drugs are being made is India. And this is something we've got to talk about. The president last week had some comments. There was something going on in the world with India and China and Russia. John, what was happening over there? What did the president say?
Well, the president has been very clear on addressing trade cheats, and he does not like when countries abuse the United States. And India has been more willing to cozy up with Russia, to cozy up with China. And President Trump tweeted out, he said, quote, "Looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China. May they have a long and prosperous future together. President Donald J. Trump." So as you can see, Zach, the president is acutely aware of the concerns with India, the actions of the Indian government. And, it's funny, a couple weeks ago, we had some conversations, a couple months ago, really, with folks talking about India. There was this general kind of, I think, consensus, wrong consensus amongst Washington that, India is an ally. Yeah, sure, India may be an ally. But when it comes to trade, how do they treat the United States? And we've seen them dump product, predatory price, cheat just like China does. And everything from steel to solar to pharmaceuticals. And we've been talking a lot about generic drugs. Their record is abhorrent. They make products that don't even work, quite frankly. They have zero absorption rates. We know because we've looked at the results from studies on these products. And so the president recognizes this, and he's applying the same standard. And so he's applying the same standard that he's applying to China. And the U.S. is not going to tolerate this type of behavior anymore.
John, people, I've heard some of those quality issues too, but the drugs that don't work, they either absorb too fast or too slow. And when they test them, they don't break down the way. I've even heard things about metal shavings in the vial, in a sterile injectable cancer drug vial, metal shavings coming out of India. I mean, these are just egregious quality errors, and we're doing nothing about it. But, now the president is, thank goodness, doing something about it and stomping his feet and making noise. But, the reality is, I don't understand India, China, Russia, they're all cozying up. But, can they really help each other? Because we're the biggest marketplace in the world. Is China going to buy all of India's drugs, or is Russia going to buy their drugs? India, I don't think is making a good choice here. What do you think about that?
They're not making a good choice, but it's the only choice that they have, quite frankly, right? Because let's think about this. The rest of the world knows that their products are crap, right? Let's just be honest. We talk to other producers, other manufacturers of generic drugs here in the US. And you know what they tell us? We hear from foreign governments saying, hey, we want American made. We want American made injectables for our hospitals. These are countries, neighboring countries to India, countries in the Middle East, countries around the globe saying, we don't want India and China. We know that there's quality problems with their products. We want our population to have the best medicine available. We believe the US is still the gold standard. Now, that certainly rings loud for everyone who's wondering, can the US still make these products? Of course we can, right? We still have the best standard, the gold standard, right? That's the old saying, the FDA is the gold standard of the globe. It should be sought after by the rest. And so, I think it's a no-brainer. Good luck to India, good luck to China, but that's really not our problem. Our problem is looking after America first and foremost. Our patients, ensuring they have the best medicine, the best access to medicine made right here in this country. And companies like Dave's are tip of the spear. They're making the investments, and they're walking the walk and talking the talk.
Yeah, that's right. We need to stop assuming that India is the safe alternative to China. Neither one of them is a good alternative. Made in America is the best place to make the drugs, the gold standard, like you say, the place that everybody wants to buy from. And it's just a shame that we haven't been buying from ourselves, but we can change that with some of these good policy moves that we're talking about here. I think this, we're going to talk about some of the top 3 moves that are happening here. I think one of them is mapping, because we don't always even know where these critical inputs come from. The drug ingredients, they call them APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients. I, as the consumer, can't even find out where my drugs, if I ask the pharmacy, I don't know where this was made. Where was the ingredients made? Where was it tested? Where was it produced? So I think getting information out, consumers out, is there any legislation doing that right now, or how's that happening? Is industry working on that? I don't know, John or Dave, if you've got any comments on that.
Well, I will go, and then Dave, if you want to comment on this, this is something that the Commerce Department is actively undertaking, right? So as they have been working on this 232 investigation, they are mapping the supply chain, right, for these APIs, these active pharmaceutical ingredients, to better understand where these products are coming from, where their supply chains are. For a long time, we heard, years prior, leading up to the first Trump presidency, oh, it's too hard. We can't find that information. The drug companies acted like they had no idea where they were buying their API from. And it was a bunch of baloney, right? These companies knew. They didn't want to let the cat out of the bag to say, oh, yeah, we're buying our API from a company in China that the U.S. government is sanctioned, right? I mean, that's not a good look, but that's the reality. And so finally, thanks to the Commerce Department, President Trump, Howard Lutnick, the team at the Bureau of Industry and Security, we will have a very crystal clear understanding of where these products are coming from. But I'm curious, Dave Sanders, do you want to comment on that as well as the supply chain mapping?
Yeah, I'll add a couple points. There is some private mapping going on right now at U.S. Pharmacopeia. That the government could utilize that to find out how can we incentivize new production of essential drugs that are in shortage. Think about this: there's 300 drugs plus in shortage for the last 3.5 years.
Yep.
Really, so unfortunately, the legacy of the Biden administration is they did nothing about it. So we need to incent production and development of those drugs that are in shortage now. There could be an accelerated review.
That's right, Dave. I gotta wrap it up. We're out of time, unfortunately, for our hour here. So we're going to be making more drugs here in America. Thank you for all your comments, John Toomey. This has been the Made in America Chairman's Hour on Home Talk Radio. Thank you all for tuning in. Come back next week, and we will be talking more about how to make generic drugs and so much more in America, as well as good jobs for good Americans. Thank you.